Ever heard of the internet? You know, the thing you're using right now? Well, there was once a time when it didn't even exist, when the largest network in the world was something called the ARPANET, and in 1988 it almost got taken down. How did that happen? Well... In 1988, the computers at Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, NASA, yes, that NASA, and many more started becoming unusable. It was a computer worm and it came out of nowhere. 6,000 out of the 60,000 computers, that's 10%, connected to the ARPANET were affected. Groups were set up to try and fix the issues. It took around 2 days to find a way to fix it and 3 days for the worm to successfully be stopped. This was the first instance of malware spreading so much and causing so many problems, so it easily made the news. Despite no files being destroyed, damages were still estimated to be $100,000 to $10 million because of delayed emails and vital government and university functions slowing immensely. But how did this happen? Who was responsible and what happened to them? Robert Tappan Morris, a Cornell graduate student, overall smart guy, decides that he wants to map the ARPANET. What is the ARPANET? Well, it's the pre-internet, the network used to connect computers before the World Wide Web was a thing. So how does he want to do this? He decides to code a computer worm. What's a computer worm? It's pretty much like a computer virus, but it doesn't need a file to infect and spread. It's just a standalone software that spreads on its own without even needing a human or a host program. So it's a little hard to keep from getting into your computer. Now you might be wondering, if all Mr. Morris wanted to do was map the ARPANET, then how did he end up possibly causing $10 million of damages? Well, you see, when he coded the worm, he made what's known in the industry as a goof. When coding the worm, Robert added a feature. To make sure that there wasn't more than one worm in a computer, he made it so that the worm would ask the computer if there was already a copy of the worm inside. If it said yes, then the worm would just leave it alone. If it said no, I think you get the point. But he thought that some computers might be able to install some program that makes their computer say yes even though it actually doesn't already have the worm. Since Robert didn't like how some people wouldn't let his harmless worm just make its way into their computer, he added another feature. When the worm would ask the computer whether or not it already had a copy, 1 out of 7 times the worm wouldn't give a f*** and just go into the computer anyway. This means that once a worm came across a computer it thought had a version of the worm already inside, there was around a 14% chance that the worm would make itself a home there anyway. Robert decided to release the program from MIT to make it harder for people to find out he made it. Great job not looking like a criminal. The previously mentioned 14% proved to be way too big of a percentage because computers started getting so many worms that the computers would start malfunctioning and becoming practically unusable since all of its processing power would just go to a crap ton of unwelcome, useless worms. When Robert realized how much he screwed the pooch, he asked his friend to send an apology and a guide on how to remove the worm to the ARPANET. But since most people with the worm were practically locked out of the computers, the message didn't exactly go to the people who needed it in time. Thankfully, as I previously mentioned, a fix was found and spread, and computers were able to go back to their normal functions. But now, everyone, including everyday people, knew about what took place and they got naturally curious about who started this whole debacle. The FBI were on it. After everything went down, a friend of Robert's, whether or not that's the same friend as the one who sent the apology, I do not know, contacted a reporter at the New York Times explaining that the worm was meant to be harmless and that the damage was a mistake. In these correspondence, the friend accidentally used Robert Tappan Morris's initials, which led to the reporter confirming and publicizing that the man behind the attack was indeed Mr. Morris. Despite the fact that this attack was the first of its kind, the US already had a law that made computer-related crimes illegal, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, or the CFAA. And after a court case where both sides argued about where in the law the word intentionally applied and the legal definition of unauthorized access, Mr. Morris was found to be guilty of violating it by knowingly causing the transmission of a program, information, code, or command, and as a result of such conduct, intentionally causing damage without authorization to a protected computer. What's a protected computer? It's pretty much a computer you need legal permission to access, like a school or government computer. He was convicted in December of 1990. He appealed, but he was rejected in March of the following year. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation, 400 hours of community service, and $10,050 fee along with fees that came along with his probation officer. So overall, considering that he maybe caused $10 million in damages, not too bad. Fun fact, this was the first court case to ever use the term internet to refer to an interconnected network of computers. Robert Tappan Morris went on to, and still is, a teacher at MIT, the place where he released the worm from. So if there's one thing to gauge from the story, it's that MIT doesn't hold grudges. During the trial, Morris explained that his intentions were, quote, to demonstrate the inadequacies of current security measures on computer networks by exploiting the security defects he had discovered. And I think we can all agree that he definitely achieved that goal. This was the first major cyber attack, and it made people realize how intense these attacks could be. Governments, universities, and everyday people saw the dangers of an interconnected network, or internet, and how flawed its security might be. We should be thankful that the first person to damage the internet severely only did it on accident and didn't destroy any files. Who knows how much more damage would have been caused if a vital government data was deleted. Nowadays, viruses, cyber attacks, and generally people exploiting the internet are commonplace, but the internet is also a lot more robust and harder to severely damage than it ever has been. I doubt that something on the same scale as the Morris worm will ever happen again, but if there's anything that this story tells us, it's that surprises tend to happen, so always expect the unexpected.